Hello, folks. Dustin Zarni here. Today is Monday. I forgot the date. All right, Monday, February 7th, and welcome to Commissioner in the Car. This is the Redistricting is final, maybe, edition here in New York. And what do I mean by that? Well, last week when I came here to talk to you, the congressional maps had just been released. The Senate and Assembly maps were on their way to being released, but the actual maps weren't out, but the bill language was out. And what has happened since? Well, in a 3-day legislative session, the New York State Democrats on the legislature passed the congressional maps, passed the Senate maps, and passed the Assembly maps. The congressional maps were passed on Wednesday of last week. The Assembly and Senate maps were passed on Thursday of last week, and they were signed that night by Governor Hochul. Shortly after she signed the legislative maps, there was a lawsuit filed, and I'll get to that in a second. But right now, these maps that have been passed by the legislature in the manner prescribed by the 2014 redistricting, and even though it didn't go through the independent redistricting commission, but part of that 2014 constitutional amendment said that if the legislature wanted by a 2/3 vote, they could supplant any maps that were given to them. And remember, there were no maps given to them that was a consensus map. They had already rejected the partisan maps by both the Democrats and the Republicans. And they could have a 2/3 vote and pass the maps. And they did so, and the governor did sign it. So they are law. These are the legislative maps that we will be running on in 2022. Now, there is a lawsuit. 14 different citizens, I believe, I saw it's a GOP-led lawsuit regarding only the congressional maps. And I think that's important to point out. So the Senate maps and the Assembly maps, as of 5 o'clock today, there has been no lawsuit filed on those maps. And in fact, those maps got some bipartisan support out of the Assembly. About a third of the GOP caucus of the Assembly voted for these maps. So the Assembly and Senate maps are not being contested at this point. Could get contested later, but are not being contested as of today. The congressional maps are being contested, but there's an interesting wrinkle to this. Normally, when a lawsuit for redistricting is filed and there's an imminent action pending, such as the March 1st deadline to start passing petitions, there would be a request to the court to do a stay or a temporary restraining order along with that lawsuit, keeping boards of elections from actually doing the work, keeping petitions from being starting on these maps. And that did not happen with this lawsuit. They filed a lawsuit, and the lawsuit has to be heard within the next 60 days, but there is no temporary restraining order. There is no stay. So that means that the petitions will go forward on March 1st, unless somehow the court issues an order between now and then. So that means the boards of elections have to do their work to get ready for the petitions on March 1st. And I'll go into what we have to do on that in a little bit later in the podcast. So while there are some saying, well, we have to wait for the lawsuits to be done to know that this is final, it's important to note that there is no temporary restraining order, no stay issued. And that usually means that that either a judge has made a judgment that the merits of the case may not necessarily be there to issue this stay. That is not what's happening in this case. In this case, the litigants decided not to seek a stay or a TRO. So it's an interesting decision by the litigants not to seek a stay. They're essentially saying that the petitioning can go forward on March 1st, And that's important because that's how people get on the ballot. They're going to get on the ballot in the new districts that are drawn. And again, the state and assembly maps have not been joined by a lawsuit, and there's only been one lawsuit on the congressional. I think we expected many different lawsuits on the congressionals, and it doesn't seem to be happening yet. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that these maps are here for the next 10 years? No. You can sue in subsequent elections, by the way. That happened in North Carolina and in Texas and some of these other states where there was decade litigation that made people change the maps. I think it happened in Virginia as well. So there could be a couple of elections on these new maps, and then there would be more evidence that a partisan gerrymander happened. And if this is in theory, I'm not saying a partisan gerrymander happened. I'm saying that it's obviously a biased map, but that's a legal finding, and that has not been made at this point. So they could wait and do these, wait for this lawsuit to be to finish. They could there could be another lawsuit on the state and assembly maps, but time is ticking. Today is February 7th, and we have to start walking petitions on March 1st. So as of this moment, there is no real sense of where this one lawsuit for the congressional race is going, and we'll have to see what happens with that lawsuit. And again, that lawsuit can be appealed, and without a stay in there, if the lawsuit doesn't go according to what the litigants want, then people are going to be running, the primary is going to happen, and the election for this year is going to go forward on these new maps. I think that's the more likely scenario at this point, but I may be eating those words later on. And of course, if any developments come, you'll be the first to know. I'll let you know on my Facebook and Twitter feeds, and also here on Commissioner in the Car. So now that we pretty much have a finalized set of maps, now the boards of elections have to do a lot of work in the next 2 weeks. In the next 2 weeks, by February 21st, we have to populate our signature requirements. And you can only do that if you have drawn the election districts that are needed for people to run on those petitions. Because of these congressional lines and Senate lines and assembly lines cut through existing election districts in almost every county in the state, we have to go and make new election districts, because voters that are in an election district have to be able to vote for the same representation from dog catcher all the way up to president. They have to be able to vote in the same districts. And this sometimes requires one block long election districts. Sometimes it's going to require us to merge election districts, to move borders of election districts, to delete whole election districts and merge them into another election district. These are the kind of things that we are now starting to go through. We look at where the lines lay. We look at where the existing election districts are. We look at all of our existing jurisdictions, and we start making changes to the map. At the Onondaga County Board of Elections, we've already started doing that. In fact, we have a meeting. We were going to have a meeting today, but we're going to have a meeting tomorrow to finalize these moves, to be able to update our shape files through our county planning, and then upload those shape files to our registration vendor. That will then geocode all of the different addresses in Onondaga County to the correct new Senate and Assembly and congressional districts, and move forward. Now, you may remember in Onondaga County we had a big fight over the county redistricting districts. Well, we are not moving those districts right now because those districts are not up until 2023. And it's not just because we're being obstinate about it or hoping for a court case. That's actually has nothing to go into this decision at the Board of Elections. The reason we're not doing that is because since there is still time to go before 2023, if a county legislature quits or passes or becomes ineligible to be in office between now and August 3rd, then they will have to run on the old districts to serve out the remaining year or so of the term on this year's election. So if we were to go ahead and move all the districts now that were approved by the county executive on December 31st, we would not be able to, actually run that election if that election happens. So we're waiting until September. Another thing that's happening in September, October, more than likely it'll probably be, all of these moves will be made after the election for next year's calendar. The Syracuse Common Council districts are being redrawn by the City of Syracuse Independent Redistricting Commission, the Good Redistricting Commission. They're going forward. They're starting to have meetings next month. So check them out. Go if you're a City of Syracuse resident, or even if you just want to see how the process is done. Go to those meetings. Go to their website. I'll be talking a lot about that as March starts. But that redistricting process won't be done until September, October as well. So we'll probably be doing a lot of changes to the city next year regarding the county ledge and city common council redistricting. So that's not being done by the Board of Elections, but the county and states are being done. Another thing that has to be done by February 21st is that we have to do all of the party switches that happen up until next week, a week from today, Valentine's Day, fall in love with your party day. You have up until February 14th to change your voter registration. And you can do that online by the DMV on the 13th or in person on the 14th, or because it has to be received by the Board of Elections on February 14th. So that has to be done now. And we have to catch up with that registration by February 21st, be as close to as close as possible to get every registration that had been in our office by February 14th done by February 21st. That's actually a pretty tall order because we usually run about 2-3 weeks behind on registration. But right now, we are doing okay because we do have those extra registration clerks, and we have been keeping up with the registration, and I think we're, about 6 or 7 days behind in registrations, which is exactly what we need to be able to get that cut off on February 14th and have it done, and have all of the registrations that are in our office by February 14th done by the 21st. It doesn't have to be exact. It's not like an election, but we're supposed to be as close to possible to get that done. So these are the things that are happening between now and February 21st at boards all throughout the state. They're cutting these election districts, which is not simple, especially in really large jurisdictions like New York City, Nassau, Suffolk County, these Westchester, where they have many different assembly districts and Senate districts, not just the few that we have here in Onondaga counties. And so they have a lot of work to get done to get this done by February 21st. And petitioning will start on March 1st. There doesn't seem to be any appetite. There are no bills introduced to delay the petitioning. And again, no stay by the court to delay the petitioning. So it looks like petitioning will start March 1st with the full allotment of signatures that you need. I believe it's 1,000 for the Senate, 500 for the Assembly. I'll go over that next week as people are getting ready to run for office. We'll go over what signatures amounts are starting March 1st. Once we populate all these fields on February 21st, that's when we determine all the signature amounts needed, and we will publish them before the start of signatures on March 1st. So that's what's going on. That's why all of this stuff is happening right now. It is not like the county redistricting that we have a whole year to get this done. This is all coming down within 3 weeks to get done. And that's because the Independent Redistricting Commission was not able to come up with consensus maps, and the legislature did not get the opportunity to draw the maps until last week. So obviously they must have been working behind the scenes. The maps that came out are, whether you think they are Democratic biased or Republican biased, they are pretty they are pretty final. They look to me like they've done a lot of work on putting things together. That doesn't mean that I agree with all their decisions. It just means that they have created maps that I believe will probably withstand a lawsuit on some of the more basic, like contiguous and compactness and all of these other things. What it may not withstand a lawsuit is on the partisan portion of the New York State redistricting code that says that if maps are drawn with partisan intents, then they may, they may have to be redrawn. Again, this is a virgin law. There's not been case law on it. It's probably one of the laws that the county redistricting might end up under. So there's going to be a lot of cause to look at how this goes. So, though I will say the county maps and the state dem maps are totally different. The county maps are, well, they are what they are. We've had a lot of discussions on them, but they were not drawn by professional map makers. It does not look, they do not look, or they do not keep communities together. They don't keep minority representation together, which is something that Democratic maps do. So, especially in the large urban areas where the Voting Rights Act comes into play. So, this is, we'll have to see how this plays out. I don't really see any questions in the comments, so I'm going to start wrapping up this Commissioner in the Car. I do have a Wonky Wednesday up from last week that on my website, dustinsarney.com. It talks about the congressional and state Senate maps. We have 3 state Senate districts now instead of 2. And I go into all 3 of how they changed. And, of course, the congressional district, how it's changed between the old maps and the new maps. This week, on Wednesday, I'll be launching another Wonky Wednesday focusing on the 4 assembly districts. We actually lost an assembly district. We used to have 5 assembly districts in Onondaga County. We are now down to 4 assembly districts in Onondaga County. And and a couple of them go out to other counties. So we actually lost, we used to have 3 wholly inside Onondaga County. Now we only have 2. As 2 districts go into neighboring counties. We'll go over that similarly that I did to the Congress and State Senate this Wednesday. My last Zoom with Zarni is up. It was a great discussion with Tom Keck, noted constitutional scholar and Supreme Court Justice scholar. We had a great long discussion about the history of the Supreme Court, Biden's coming pick, and what we can what we can see for Supreme Court reform down the line. And then this week I'll be having a discussion with Christine Wood on Friday, a public citizen, a local activist who will talk about the failure ironically, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which would have ended partisan redistricting on congressional maps, how it failed. But hint, Joe Manchin, Kristen Sinema, the Republicans, all voting against it. A lot of the Republicans who are complaining about the New York map voting against it, and what our hopes are for voting legislations in the coming weeks and months. So that's what I got going on this week. Once again, go to dustinsarney.com to subscribe. Everything is always going to be free on there. I pay for this out of my own money. I design it myself. I do not take outside money for this. It is an extension of my public information campaign and hosting of all my content. Commissioner in Cars, Zoom with Zarni, Wonky Wednesdays are all on there, as well as any election news that I'm a part of is posted on there as well. That way you can keep up to date with everything that is happening in Onondaga County. Speaking of which, I was a guest on Newsmakers this last weekend with Andrew Donovan on WSYR9. You can find that link on my website as well as the Facebook and Twitter feeds. That was a great discussion on the congressional maps. I appeared with my good friend Jude Seymour, who's a Republican commissioner up in Jefferson County, and we talked about and we actually agreed that the best way to stop this would be citizen-led redistricting. And so hopefully by 2030, that's what we'll have in New York. But we are where we are today, and we'll have to move on. Thank you again. Remember that the masking mandate is still in effect in New York, although Governor Hochul announced today that there will be an announcement on a portion of the masking mandate, I believe she said, on Wednesday. We'll have to see what she says, and of course on my Friday Zoom with Zarni, I'll inform you, because masking is important. Fighting this virus is important. Get your vaccine. Get boosted. Numbers are going down in Onondaga County and across New York State. The Omicron surge seem to be getting on the other end of it, which means that perhaps we can back off a little bit on some mitigation efforts. But the best thing to do to keep cases going down is get vaccinated, get boosted, and let's get out there and see if we can have some normalcy this summer. Yeah, that's about it. Next week, we'll talk about village elections as well, because village elections for March are happening. The Onondaga County Board of Elections runs the Fayetteville and Manlius villages that are happening, and there are going to be contested races in those villages. So stay tuned. We'll talk about that next week, because the candidates are filing tomorrow, so I'll have a complete list of all the candidates and what lines they're running on for next week, and we'll talk about those village elections. So stay tuned, and bye-bye.